I had the pleasure of interviewing Father Jayson Landeza, and what you're about to see is an excerpt from our talk. Share it around.
Father, tell everybody, first of all, from your position, what's happening with Oakland spiritually?
That's a good question. I think a lot of churches are because we've been closed essentially throughout this past year. Churches of all denominations have been struggling, at least being able to meet physically. But I know that a lot of churches are doing online services. Spiritually, I think there's a real desire for healing in this city, and I think a lot of churches are doing their share of work insofar as providing not just spiritual healing, but physical healing. A lot of churches are involved in food drives. A lot of churches are involved in COVID testing. Some of your larger churches, I know that I think at some of Allen Temple, Center of Hope, other large churches here in the east side are providing vaccines that are being distributed by FEMA. I know my church has also been contacted by FEMA. So I think there's if there's some difficulty or shortcomings in this pandemic with regards to spiritually addressing the needs of our people, at least we're trying to look at other ways to do that. I have to say it's been a struggle, like for everyone who's had to maintain an online presence. Having that physical presence of people in the pews and in your churches have been, I think, a real struggle.
That did actually occur to me. I hear like the Resurrection, no, is a Resurrection Church, Revolution Church that has online programs. Allen Temple has one, but yeah, it is it never, and I should account that I'm in suburban Atlanta, Georgia. I haven't found a church I'm ready to attend.
Sure, sure.
I'm used to being back in Oakland, right? But
right.
But you do miss the fellowship, eh? And it's a big part of our lives on a weekly basis.
But I think for a lot of people, they've had to find ways to deal with this lack of interpersonal contact, particularly in congregate settings. I mean, Zoom has been a real godsend for a lot of people because they've been able, not just in the spiritual realm, but certainly in a lot of different other areas. A lot of people like myself get zoomed out of meetings, but it's still a mechanism by which contact is being made. And the religious entities are utilizing that kind of technology in order to maintain contact with their congregations, and large and small. So that's at least how spiritual entities here in Oakland, religious institutions, continue to remain in contact with their people. More so now because we have seen an uptick in violence, and particularly in the east side, which has been really a deep and profound sense of concern for a lot of us who've been here for quite a number of years. We've seen this ebb and flow, but particularly over the past few weeks, the number of homicides that have taken place, particularly on the east side, has been just really pretty disturbing. There isn't an evening that I don't hear gunshots and gunfire. I keep my department radio attuned to all the different calls throughout to the city of Oakland and throughout from police and fire, and I keep that on throughout most of the time. And just the level of violence that's taking place these days is just really really worrisome and scary, for that matter, and sad.
What is going on? I understand it's the pandemic and the loss of money, but what else is going on that's fueling this, particularly in Oakland? Because I haven't been back in about a year plus. I've been here with my mom in Georgia. I still have my place in Adams Point. But
Sure.
The last time I was back, within 40 minutes, my car was broken into, and I thought, oh,
Sure.
wow, it was. People said, oh, it's just a common thing, and I thought, what's going
Sure.
on? What is going on in Oakland and in the Bay Area and our urban cities where this is happening, but in particular in the Bay Area with smash and grabs and.
Well, I can certainly speak not on behalf, but it's just an observation of what's going on in Oakland. I think certainly that the economic effects of the pandemic have driven some folks to going to the route of crime to whatever. There's an intense gang battle going on in East Oakland. LaRonne Armstrong, the new chief, had spoken to quite a number of us as clergy about the kind of battles that are going on, particularly related to gang warfare, essentially what it is, within the black gangs and Latino gangs. So that's seeing an uptick over the past few months, and has been really the quite a number of the homicides that have taken place here in the Deep East. And this combination of the economic effects of the pandemic, perhaps even the emotional effects of the pandemic, and as well too ongoing gang warfare that's taking place in these parts.
To what degree? It seemed like we had a nice little nirvana just around the time the pandemic first hit,
Right.
And then the first monies came in, and people sheltered, and then all of a sudden, it seemed like just as the money ran out, the crime went up. But
So the other thing too is I know that the Oakland, and I've been a part of that personally, the part of the ceasefire program for the Oakland Police Department had been doing some really noticeable work, and work that can be directly attributed to their efforts on the part of ceasefire to work with the most at risk. Ceasefire is a program. It's kind of a wraparound program that really tries to address those people who are at most risk of a number of things. Most risk of being victims of violent crime, most likely to have been perpetrators in years past, and maybe perhaps are on the verge of themselves of incarceration, and trying to get them the resources they need to avoid that kind of return to a lifestyle. And the funding for that had been cut because of the larger cutbacks taking place in the city of Oakland and specific to the Oakland Police Department. So I know that unit had been cut, its funds depleted. So, and a good portion of the work being done there was to allay the possibility of homicides taking place in Oakland. So, I can't say that's the full reason why you see such things happening, but it contributes to why you see an uptick in violence. That kind of program, those kinds of programs, and that kind of funding, which was vital to the work in trying to reduce homicides here in Oakland. I know that firsthand because I work with ceasefire folks and doing interventions along with folks from the Oakland Police Department. So no, I know that firsthand how well that program works.
And also mixed in with that, we've had COVID-related illnesses and death, right? How has that impacted the community from your perspective?
Could you repeat that question? I think I lost you halfway through there.
Sure. On top of that, we've had COVID-related illnesses and death, and how has that impacted the community from your perspective?
Oh, I think I live in one of the highest rates of infection communities in the Bay Area. The Fruitvale, particularly the Latino community, portions of East Oakland, it's affected insofar as an uptick in both infection and death rates. The concern right now we're having is the availability of vaccines to those affected communities. Initially, the Coliseum was selected as a location because it's in the midst of a targeted location, and yet the Chronicle has reported within the past 24 hours or so that 41% of those receiving vaccines at the Coliseum were Anglo, and which doesn't speak to the amount of targeting that's taken place to the affected communities of color. So the attempt that FEMA is trying to do insofar as connecting with congregations within the affected areas, I think it's a way to try to allay this disproportionate number of infections and deaths that are taking place in places like the Fruitvale Latino community, as well as my